Well, hello everybody and welcome again to one of my live sessions. And guess what I'm painting today? I know, a feather, as you can see here. This is a pigeon feather. So a nice one to work on. Just black and white, so it's going to be, but with a little bit of colour in there as well. Not masses of colour, believe it or not. So what we're looking at doing is working with a wet and wet wash and then trying to get the details over the top of that. So I'll show you how to apply that, well, literally in a minute. Now I have put a bit of masking fluid on there as well. I've used some, this is the R1 by Artco. There you go, Frisk, a blue artist masking fluid there. I do like to use blue so I can see where I put it on the paper as well, so it's very, very useful for that. So this is going to reserve the central parts of the feather. In other words, the shaft or the rachis or ratchis of the feather. I don't know how you pronounce that, rachis? You tell me in the comments down below, please. And then from the feather, we've got all the barbs coming out, as you can see. We've got the two veins, or the veins on the sides as well. And I'll tell you a little bit more about those barbs in a bit as well. But first, let's make a start. I'm going to use a size 6 brush, and this is one by Rosemary & Co. That's the XP Series 366. I'm going to first of all wet the feather. Right, here we go. Plenty of water here. I mean loads of water. I'm going to leave my pencil marks there a little bit deeper than what I'd normally do. I'd lighten them down normally by using something like a putty eraser, something like that there. Quite a malleable, stretchy eraser. And you dab with it, you don't tend to rub with it. I don't anyway with those. And when you wet the paper down, wet it 2 or maybe even 3 times. A little bit more down there. Do one side first of all, then we'll do the same on the other side thereafter. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let's do both sides. Yeah, it's not very large, that's not the other side, is it? It's only quite a short area there, as in the distance across. So I'm going to wet that one as well. Quite a lot. I want the water to soak into the paper. A little bit more down there. Just had to laugh at myself then, because I just started looking at my reference photograph when I'm doing the tutorials for my Patreon members for our wildlife paintings. I normally have my tablet in front of me, and I've got a habit of looking up at it every few seconds at the photograph I'm working from. I just looked up and I think, oh, it's not there. Where's it gone? It's here. I've got the real feather here, as you can see. Collected in our little village here. Can't remember where really, probably in the back garden, something like that. Okay, that's quite wet on there now. I'll just show you how wet that is. Kind of give us some idea there, look. So it's really, really wet, isn't it? And that's what you want to do. So soak it through and make sure that you go over it again, ensuring that it stays wetter that little bit longer. That's why you let it soak in a little bit, then put another layer of water over the top. And then again, let that soak in just a little bit as well. That's the beauty about working with wet and wet. You know, if you work with just literally just a completely flooded paper of water, your paint will just run down the paper and sit. My board's on a slight angle, probably something like that. And I don't want that to happen, to be honest. I just want to be able to control that paint. I want to control that water on the paper. Okay. I'm going to start off with this colour here. And it looks quite messy on there, doesn't it? This is Payne's Grey with a tiny amount of burnt umber. That's all it is. I'm going to go for the central parts around there first of all. Pops on the paper. Just make sure that you have allowed that water to soak in that little bit there. Like that. Now normally watercolour dries a little bit lighter than it would do as it looks now. How much lighter depends on how much pigment you got within that paint, obviously. Okay, a little bit higher there. Something similar, it doesn't have to be the same as that. Because they do vary slightly on all the feathers here. I've got quite a few of these pigeon feathers knocking about in the house. We tend to pick up in the country lanes here. Okay, soften down the edges. And that will be the lightest colour, so you can lighten that a little bit more. Just a touch. Yeah, lovely, lovely feathers. And actually these pigeons, believe it or not, are the favourite prey of a goshawk. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Google tells me these things, you know. Favourite prey of a goshawk. They are quite chunky, aren't they? I'm not surprised. with something like this. And as we know here in Devon where we live, is that they breed, well, just about all year round. Yeah. And their nests are made of, well, tiny twigs. Very feeble looking nests. And sometimes we've actually found eggs on the floor below the nest. You know, when they've laid or made the nest in a tree, you know, where we tend to often see them. It's a bit of a pain when you think, oh, come on, get some more sticks in there before you start laying the eggs, will you? Just re-wetting the areas again, just ensuring it stays wetter longer. Over the top of that masking fluid. I put the masking fluid on first because I didn't want to have to wait for it to dry live on camera. Then we go for the darker colour. Now this darker colour is just a simple mix of the same, and just about Payne's Grey and Burnt Umber, but richer, thicker, as you can see here. So apply that to the paper. Okay, let it soak in. Okay, just going to make sure that the top edge at the moment is round, but bear with me on this. This is more brown, isn't it? A little bit more there. And probably down to about, yeah, what do you reckon? About there? Or a little bit further. Come on, let's go further down. And let's grab a little bit more of the Payne's Grey. Just that one there, look. And we'll add that one into there to darken it slightly. And add that over the top. That's really dark, isn't it? It's not pitch black. Not really, really dark, but it's dark. So I'm going to make sure go over that again, like that, to darken it down. As I mentioned, it will dry that a little bit lighter. Just a little bit. Okay. Now, whilst that's wet, I'm just going to wash and brush out a minute. I'm going to get a size 00 brush. Load that one up as well. I'm going to flick out, using the wet paint as well that's on the paper, some very fine lines. Now, you've got to remember the direction these lines go. So it's like a V shape like that, isn't it, from the central vein. What's the ventral vein? The central part of it, which is basically the shaft. I know. I'll get the names right eventually, you know. And the same on the other side, but they're more so on that side, aren't they? It's a little bit more. Make use of that wet paint on the paper. Tiny little tiny marks like that. Flick them up. And here as well. Maybe I should have left a gap there. But hey ho, let's just extend these out that little bit further on this side now. Just about there. Yeah, something like that anyway. And break them up. Don't make them too even. That's the key. Who's got a key? That's what it's supposed to look like. Something like that anyway. Get some more paint. And bring that up to there. Bring that up to there. Now that's similar. It's not the same, but it's similar. And that's all that matters. A nice sharp point on the top. And bring that one down to there. That's better. So that's the top part done for the wet and wet wash. Now I'm going to carry on further down. Just re-dampen. Make sure it's nice and damp, not soaking wet. Do the same down here, but less so. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get our grey. Pop some of that in there as well. Just initially. Let it soak in. A little bit down there. Clean damp brush. And very lightly blend it towards the top. See, already we've got the colour on the paper, haven't we? We can call it colour. It is colour, isn't it, really? Then lift any colour off that you don't want on there. You can control this, remember. Did you also know, by the way, that immature pigeons are called a squab? Squab? I never knew that, you know, until I found it on the old internet. Squab. A squab. There you go. There's no little factoid there for you. I've got quite a few lined up, by the way. Okay, now just down the side here, re-wetting there. Now once it's damp, but not soaking wet, I'm going to drop in our sort of browny black colour there. Now you can see that on this feather it's not quite as dark, is it? So I'm going to lighten this in a minute. So get the colour on the paper first of all. Like that. And that. A bit of a tide mark going on there, I don't like that. Just re-dampen it a lot with a clean brush. That's better. Then tiny circles. Start to blend the edge of this out. So you can't see where one colour starts and the other colour finishes. And the same on the other side. Okay. Now once that's soaking in, what I want to show you is what the feathers are. In other words, remember what we've got on the parts of a feather. We've got the central vein. Or I'm trying to think what that was called. No, it wasn't a vein, it's a shaft, isn't it? We've got the shaft down the middle like that. Okay, as we know, all the way down through the feather. The bottom of the feather is obviously the quill, going right down to the very bottom. And then you've got the downy barbs at the end, which is all this lot down here. We've also got the barbs coming off the sides, as we know. But from those barbs along the side of the feather, all these down here, look, you've got what's called barbettes, or barbuels. Can't get the words out today. Barbuels. I'm trying to remember what we read on the internet a long time ago now. So when you've got the barbs coming along, you've actually got a barb, then you've got tiny little marks coming off that barb like so. See that? And then on the other side as well, it's like miniature feathers, isn't it? That's just on one barb. Or barbules. And then you've got another one by the side of it, which does the same thing. And they interlock, just a bit like Velcro really, the way these feathers sort of lock together. So I'll show you what I mean with this feather we've already got here. Just wash that brush out a minute. So if you look at this feather, you can see that they're quite tight together. These are interlocked, aren't they? So if I very carefully pull one apart, like so, what the bird will do, it will preen itself, and then you'll find, eventually, the bits of Velcro will simply stick back together. And there you go, look. Isn't that clever? I know. Nature at its best, isn't it? It really is, for something like that. So remember, you've got the barbs coming away from that. Then these little tiny miniature feathers coming away from the barbs, are barbules. Okay? Got it together? Yeah, there you go. I know. And the very tip of the feather, I believe, is called a canamos. Got that? Right, okay. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments down below. I very often am wrong. I don't mind being wrong occasionally. In fact, I don't mind being wrong most of the time. Right, okay, a little bit more down there. And then I want this to dry, and then I can start to get some details over the top of that. But it's nearly there already. Just the basic foundation washes, that's all it is. Once it's dry, then I can remove that masking fluid as well. Now, one thing I don't normally do is dry painting with masking fluid on, because sometimes it can harden the masking fluid and you find it's very, very difficult to remove that masking fluid thereafter, and therefore it can also occasionally tear the paper as well. You don't want that to happen, do you? Not really. So I would recommend, if you're doing this, leave it to dry naturally. But because I'm live here today, here on YouTube, I'm going to use a hairdryer. Yeah, I do possess one. And because I'm going to use a hairdryer, it's not something I would normally preach, okay? Right, here we go. Let's give it a quick try. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. While I'm trying this off anyway, I'm going to show you a video we're working on at the moment on Patreon. How would you like to learn how to paint a toucan? And this is a Toco toucan. A beautiful, colourful bird. It really is. Well, the bill certainly is. All right, so back in about literally 1 minute while I just quickly dry this off. Toucan, or should I say Toco toucan. So get ready for bright, vibrant colours, and also painting one very large, solid beak. So I decided to have a lighter coloured background. I know on the photograph it's really dark, isn't it? But for me that just didn't work. I want the focus of attention to be solely on the toucan. But yet you still need a background, because if you didn't have one on there, all you'll have is one long head on that painting. We're not painting the whole body of the bird, just the head, the shoulders, parts of the wing, and just one foot. And don't forget that little branch as well. Our main focus with this painting, obviously, is working on that beak. And even when we're applying the coloured washes, I'm starting to consider the shape of each part, gradually building up the colours as we go along, and then adding those details over the top. So let's get the brushes wet, shall we? And let's paint this Toco toucan in watercolours. Let's get started. Well, that's the quickest blow dry I've ever done on a painting, it really is. Yeah, I know. What you need to do as well is add a little bit of colour in there. Now I've got some burnt sienna, and just while I'm going to work on the bottom first of all anyway. A little bit of burnt sienna in there, only because I think it needs a little bit of brown in there as well as, even though I've just dried this. Just a touch of that on one side should do. And that'll dry while I'm working on everywhere else at the moment. I don't want to get the hairdryer out yet again. Okay, that was my old mixing brush I used there, by the way. Look at the state of it. But it's good enough for doing something like that. It's amazing what you can use. You don't always have to buy expensive brushes, you know. And by the way, the paper I'm using today is Bockingford. It's a £140 cold pressed paper made by St Cuthbert Mill. That's called St Cuthbert's Mill, I think it is. In fact, I've been to their place of their factory as well, and it was fantastic to walk around there and see how they make the paper. It really was. Now, here we go. Let's start on some basic details, shall we? I'm going to start off around the central area. And what we can do, use this watered down version of Payne's Grey with just a touch of burnt umber in there. Give it a tap or two and start to paint all them fine little tiny barbules we can see, okay, or little barbs for the barbules that come off them. A little bit more down there. This is going to take quite a lot of time trying to get this on, but you've got to take your time with it, as with any painting. I've been also leaving the masking fluid on. I decided that whilst I was drying the painting that 1 minute. That's because when you're adding these on, you can go over the top of the masking fluid. It doesn't matter, does it? You know, rather than trying to be careful not to touch that central line. So take your time with it. There's no rush. There really isn't. And what you can do, once you've got this layer on, you can very, very lightly soften it down. Not completely. If the line's a bit too harsh, you can just lightly soften them just to knock them back a touch. That's what I tend to do. A little bit more down there. Then start to change direction as well. When you're doing this, also think about a clock face and the direction of the clock face, the way the hand goes. So that's going more towards, what would you say, 10 o'clock-ish, something like that? Yeah, I'd say so. I go the opposite way around on the other side, more towards, say, 2 o'clock-ish. I'll keep putting the ish on the end because they do vary slightly. And when you come further down, we'll need to start to form the shape we can see in there as well. I didn't put quite enough wash colour in there, but that's okay. We can paint it that way as well. I'll show you how to do that. So adding one side in, as you can see already, is making a difference. It really is. And when we do remove that masking fluid from the middle, that's going to reserve that white to the paper, and then we can kind of paint in the shaft then. Get that one painted in. Bit of a fold over there, bit of a slight fold there, and on the side as well. Let's do the same on the other side. I'm going to form these in a minute. I'm trying not to overload this brush as well. This brush, by the way, is a Winsor & Newton Cotsman Series 111. It's a brush that I've been using, or the style of brush I've been using for many, many years. I really have. I do like these brushes. They don't last that long, but then again, they're not that expensive. So I'm not too worried about that. And I'm certainly not a rich man, so there you go. So keep adding these on, trying to go in the same direction all the time. If it's easier, turn your hand around, so if I can do it this way around instead. Depends how it feels in your hand there. Whatever's most comfortable, trying to get that angle. Because sometimes you've got to think about the kind of angle of your wrist as well while you're doing this. If you're trying to do it against that sort of natural curve of your wrist, then you find it gets a little bit tricky to do. So a little bit more down there, very lightly there, look. That's because there's hardly any paint on that brush. A little bit more down there. Okay, just a tiny amount there. Now, even though these birds nest all year round, just about, well, I'm sure they do, they only tend to lay 2 eggs on average. You know, just a couple of eggs. That's it. No more, no less. I suppose we find as well with larger birds, they tend to very often lay fewer eggs. But we've got a bird here called a blue tit in the UK, and they're lovely little bluebirds, well, hence the name. And they tend to lay, well, up to like a dozen eggs, sometimes 14. You think, what? But they are small birds, not as small as a hummingbird, you know, but they are small birds. And because of that, you know, they only lay their eggs once. They have one nest a year, and that's it, normally. And the same goes for great tits and so on. But these particular birds, I don't know, they'll nest all year round. Can you imagine nesting in the cold outside and the snow and the ice? Oh dear, I don't know, it must be pretty cold, it really must be. Okay, a little bit more now. I'm going to go for the darker colour. Just water it slightly. Okay. Load it, give it a tap or two, and then you can start to form those basic shapes in the middle here. I'm going to soften this down in a minute, don't worry about that. It's looking a little bit too harsh at the moment. Okay, start to add these in now. Very carefully. Look at the shape around there as well. A little bit more water in there. It's not flowing quite enough. So this is now more of a milky consistency paint rather than creamy. Then bring them out and feather them out. Yeah, okay, I tried. Then the same on the other side. Bit too much, give it a tap. Then round it towards this area here. Don't just draw a line or anything like that. Use those lines and create that shape that you can see within that feather. A little more down there. And just work your way down, doing the same thing of course, but very carefully. I'm on skimming that paper. Very lightly skimming it, nothing more than that. That's looking better now. Then just a few odd ones, slightly further out, with my just about dry brush here. Okay. I'm going to soften down all this area down here now. So back to the size 6, nice and damp, not soaking wet. So when you load your brush up, it's full of water at the moment. Just take it once with some kitchen roll like that. That's enough. And that should be enough to just make sure that not too much water goes onto that painting. Then in the direction the feathers grow, lightly soften that back. Very lightly like that. Working your way down. Just ties them together a little bit more, a bit like Velcro really. The same down there. Very lightly soften them back. You can still see them, but they're not quite as harsh, not quite as sharp, should I say really. Then this side as well. Okay, a little bit more there. And then down the bottom. Now what I want to paint in as well, before some detail towards the top, are those downy barbs. So the downy barbs, all the kind of fluffy bits around here. So make sure your paint is nice and watery, which is there, look. And then start to flick out. Some little tiny lines like this. Barely touching the paper, so 2 hairs in air literally, just about, ish. Ish. Coming away from that central line. Okay, down there. A few more down there. Kind of flicking out all over the place. Because when you think this is where the blood supply was when the feather was growing. Because when the feather's grown, I believe, from what I've read anyway, it's that the blood supply stops then to that feather after it's fully grown. Then that's it. That's why they fall out. That's why when they molt, they can remove those feathers and a new one will start to grow again. A little bit more down there. And I think that will do for there. Now let's get some darker marks higher up. So again, the same direction. I don't know, I'm not going to be able to see that, I don't think. Oh, I can just about make it out. And on the main feather itself, you can hardly see them on there as well. So add those in. Only just see it. You probably can't actually. I don't know if you can on camera. This side, once it's wet, you can probably see it though. So thinking about the direction all the time, adding plenty of lines in, all parallel with one another. Try not to overlap them if you can. A few more towards the top. You can barely see them, I know. And that should, for me anyway, do for that area. Now then, the masking fluid. Be careful of this area as it's still wet. What I want to do is remove that masking fluid now. Make sure your fingers are nice and dry. So kitchen roll, anything like that. And clean as well. No natural oils on those fingers. Because if you have, what can happen then? So you find that you'll end up moving, or putting oil on the paper and your paint won't stick. It won't soak into that paper. There you go. You can use a masking fluid removal tool, it's like a big eraser, isn't it? Like a block of rubber, really. I've seen those. In fact, I've got one knocking about somewhere. Okay, that's the shaft now revealed. And we can start to fill that in bit by bit. So it starts off by just defining the outside edge of this, but very lightly. It goes down to roughly, looking at this one here, about there. Yeah. And the same on this side as well. Just tapers out right to the end there. There's a little calamus just there. Okay. Then we need to outline this line as well, neaten that down. So I'm going to go with my darker colour. I'm going to water it down just a fraction more. Just a fraction. And we can just neaten those edges down a little bit now. We can see it's quite slim towards the top. In fact, we can't really see it up there, can we? But what I might do, I'm going to put a light colour, a light version of this colour in there in a minute. So we can just see it, even though in reality it's not that obvious. So you're going to outline this, but very lightly, very fine outline. So by taking most of the paint off the brush, you'll end up with a finer line, not a blobby line. Then work your way down. Just down the centre, or the side of the centre, you know what I mean. You do know what I mean, of course you do. Then this side as well. Very carefully. A little bit more. Just a touch down there. Even though these wood pigeons are called wood pigeons, there's different names for them apparently. I've heard some of them before. But the ones in question is woody. Not woody woodpecker, woody. Then we've got cusshat. Cusshat, I've never heard of that one. You got cushy-doo. What's a cushy-doo? Well, apparently it's a wood pigeon. Really? Well, quist, ringdow, and ringed dove. There you go. Or ringdove. Oh, never knew that, did you? Okay, and then just down here. Now, if you've got anything that you want me to paint, live here on YouTube, let me know in the comments, please do. Because I'd like to hear from you. If there's anything that you're interested in having a go at with watercolours, that's a small subject, something that's fairly quick, then let me know. I'll certainly give it a go for you, or at least I'll consider it. Depends on what it is, obviously. Of course it does. But there's a chance I might try that for you as well, live on camera, one day. Yeah, you never know. Okay, so we're going to get our lightest colour now. Just Tintin. That's that Hello cartoon character, isn't it? Tintin. Just the very tip of that central area, the shaft there. Just a little bit more there. And then using our brown, our burnt sienna. I think I did put a touch of burnt umber in there as well. Just to dull it a fraction. You can add this in towards the central part of the shaft. Just down the middle there. And there are some more details in there as well, as we can see. It depends how fine you want to get. I know. How fine do you want to be? So we can add a little bit more detail in there if we wanted to, using our weakest colour to begin with. Very light, barely touching. The left hand side of that, well, burnt sienna, burnt umber mix, all the way down to there. And then the right hand side of that burnt umber, burnt sienna mix. Just to add some basic details within the central area. You know, you can twiddle this, you can fine tune it as much as you want, you really can. Sometimes you think, well, there might be a little bit too much paint on, you can lift paint off, of course you can. Some paint is staining, as we know, so you find that, for example, Payne's Grey is staining, I find that. So you find it doesn't lift very well at all. I'll just show you what I mean. Like, I'm going to get a dedicated lifting off brush. I have made my own, by the way, as well, but it's not quite as fine as this one. This is my own one. I know. I do have a video on making brushes, by the way. Some of the brushes I use are special effect ones. For example, I've got one here which I use for fur, and that's really good. Really is good for fur. You won't think it, would you, looking at the state of that? I know. An old brush crushed down and kind of sprayed out and chipped and kind of trimmed back a little bit. But it works a treat for fur. So if you want to make brushes, have a look at the video, which we'll put up here for you as well. Okay, that's after it's gone live, once the video is kind of processed here on YouTube, which will probably be the day after, something like that anyway. I'm just going to lift off a little bit of paint, just in places, towards a slightly lighter area here. A little bit more. So you find burnt umber isn't that staining, but it's just that Payne's Grey. But I don't mind using it. But the beauty about Payne's Grey, though, it's transparent. You know, I do like using a transparent medium if I can. And I can just bring in a little bit of a line here as well, need be. Just bring it in. Few tweaks here and there. Now I can just see a bit of a shadow on this right hand side here. So I'll add that one in as well in a second. Put that there. I'll fine tune all this now. So just sort that a little bit there, a touch. There we go, that'll do. And the shadow is going to come down, probably from there. I'm going to wet that at the end so it's not too sharp an edge. From there, I'm going to widen it slightly to there. And then all the way down the side here. Go for our weakest mix. Add that shadow in. Just like that. See the feathers all the way around here, all these little kind of barbs that we can see, all knitted together, aren't they? A bit like that Velcro I mentioned. There aren't that many apart from one here which I've painted in by mistake. No, I haven't. I wanted to put that one in there, just so it looks a bit different. You find them all joined together really, really well. And I think we're nearly there for that. Now, if you wanted to lighten that, you can lighten it down a little bit more, or if you wanted to even fine tune the shaft in the middle, you can do that as well. But I think, you know, that should do for this for now. Normally what I would do, I'd spend even longer trying to create a feather such as this. But because we're live today, I don't want to be on here for like 2 hours painting the feather for you. I don't think you'd appreciate that. But remember, if there's anything you want me to do, let me know in the comments, please do. Oh, and one last thing as well, don't forget don't forget to click on that subscribe and like button as well. That's very, very important, because if you do that, when I go live again, there's a good chance you shouldn't miss it, because YouTube will let you know. They do normally. And also, any other videos we put on here, which we do every single week, which we do, you won't miss those either. So we do put a lot of video content on here. We've got literally hundreds of videos for you to watch. So until next time around, I'm going to say one last thing. You know what that is, don't you? Yeah, of course you do. Keep them bushes wet, okay? And bye for now. Yeah, that was fun.